Notice does not prove consciousness. That is exactly why the experiment matters. Watch one signal approach a threshold. Below it, the signal leaves a faint broadcast. Push the same content higher, and the workspace ignites. I coded mechanisms from several major theories: global workspace access, predictive inference, and models of self and social coordination. In 2 minutes, we'll change one variable, rerun the same signal, and test whether its prediction survives. Before we go further, we need 3 labels. MEASURED means a value, trace, or behavior appeared in the frozen run. NFRD means the implementation supports a functional interpretation. NOTPROVEN means the claim would cross from mechanism into subjective experience. Those levels are easy to blur. A system can implement access, self-monitoring, reports, planning, and social behavior without settling phenomenality. Even a fluent report can be generated from variables. So every chapter will ask what changed, show the evidence, and name the boundary. That caution makes the instrument more useful, not less ambitious. Why translate theories into software at all? Because prose can hide assumptions. Code has to choose an update order, a threshold, a state representation, and a consequence. Once those choices are explicit, we can seed the run, perturb and input, inspect intermediate state, export the trace, and repeat the experiment. The ambiguity now has somewhere concrete to go. Humanity's cognitive core is inspectable Python driven by a fixed seed configuration. There is no LLM in the cognitive core. An optional language model path can render grounded internal variables on demand, but it sits outside that deterministic loop. Removing it does not remove the mechanisms we are testing. The interface exposes implemented mechanisms. The API exposes state. Traces can be projected into JSONL, JSON, or CSV, and checkpoints. Let a run continue from a recorded state. At seed 42, tick 32, the coverage panel reports 33 of 33 functional entries active. That is breadth we can audit. It is not a consciousness certificate or a phenomenality verdict. Here is the central experiment. Start 2 fresh runs with seed 42. Stop both at tick 2. Inject the same content probe signal. Same signal and hold the effective threshold at about 0.257. Keep the world workspace settings, persistence, tracing, and enabled mechanisms matched. Now, make your prediction. In the first run, set activation to 0.85. In the second, set it to 0.90. That is the intended change. If workspace access behaves like a thresholded competition, one probe should remain subliminal while the other should win and broadcast globally. The first probe scores about 0.242 below the effective threshold. Its broadcast is only 0.073. The second scores about 0.287 above that same threshold, and its broadcast is also 0.287. The visible state changes from sublisect to pleminal to JBLAX. That matched comparison is useful because the intervention and consequence are inspectable. It shows a functional ignition transition inside this model. It does not show a private point of view arriving at tick 2. A threshold crossing can support a theory of access while leaving the existence of experience completely unresolved. The distinction remains the result. Global Workspace is only one part of the loop. Specialist coalitions compete for access, and attention schema tracks aspects of that selection. Higher order and metacognitive state can represent what the system is doing. Active inference machinery connects beliefs, expected outcomes, and action. The point is not the acronym, count. It is the interaction between inspectable states. Each handoff leaves another variable open to inspection. The integration readouts must stay separate. Humanity exposes a RecSpace, phi, proxy, Barrett-Seth, R, and a coarse causal phi calculation. These are different constructions with different roles. They are not one interchangeable IIT number. In the horizon capture, fire is about 0.1756, while coarse causal phi is about 0.2408. Why combine these mechanisms? Because an intervention can now propagate through attention, self-modeling, valuation, memory, and action. Leaving intermediate state, we can inspect at seed 42, tick 32. The horizon trace also reports variational free energy, near 0.7676. Calm regime. Those values describe this configured model. None is a magic meter for experience. The boundary remains. Let us test 3 functional signatures. First, masking. Predict what should happen when a target reaches access alone, then competes with a stronger mask. Across paired hermetic runs using base seed 42 and seeds 42 through 47. Target access is 1.0 alone and 0.0. When masked, the functional masking score is 1.0 second. Attentional blink. Predict T2, access in a timing match control, and place 2 immediately after a strong tone. Across the same 6-seed sequence, mean 2 access is 1.0 in control and 0.0 after tone. The functional blink score is 1.0. The model's recent competition changes later access. Third, priming. Present a weak prime that stays subliminal. Insert a gap, then return the same content. In the paired runs, prime subliminality is 1.0, return access is 1.0 when primed, and 0.0 without the prime. The resulting functional score is 1.0. A trace can alter the next competition without prior global access. 3 questions, 3 interventions, 3 measurable differences. That makes the batteries useful for regression tests and theory comparison inside the architecture. But the score of 1.0 is a functional score under these hermetic configurations. It is not evidence that masking felt absent, that 2 was missed by a subject, or that a prime entered anyone's awareness. That boundary stays experimentally useful. The next layer uses words that sound personal. Sleep, dream, curiosity, agency, personality, self-affinity. We should not ban those words, but we should cash them out. Here they refer to state transitions, action selection, learn parameters, monitoring limits, and model-specific summaries, not a hidden person behind the interface. In the seed 42 capture at tick 64, sleep and dream mechanisms are active. The same run reports functional individuation near 0.8316 and coarse causal phi near 0.4192. The interface also exposes learning and personality state. These are reproducible variables for that configuration, not measurements of an inner life. A relational self-battery makes the comparison explicit. At seed 7, tick 40, social presence is 0.975, with 5 agents, 0, in isolation. A separate source monitoring battery, at seed 42, scores 39 of 40 origin verdicts correctly, and records 1 self-generated external analog misattribution. The useful prediction is conditional. Alter sleep pressure, social context, learning history, or source cues, and these variables should change in specific ways. We can test those dependencies. We cannot infer an experiencing self merely because the dashboard organizes them under a self-heading. Richer, functional self-modeling makes the experiment deeper. It does not close the explanatory gap. What happens when one deterministic agent becomes 4, sharing a world and a naming game? Predict that repeated successful exchanges should stabilize some tokens, while failed exchanges should keep the lexicon moving. The society view lets us watch agents model one another, exchange signals, and update a shared convention over time. At seed 42, tick 120, 4 agents reach convergence 0.8333 and mean communication success 0.7592. The recorded conventions map food and hazard to Vicaso and Curio to loop. In this capture, only satiation and the language drive are enabled among the specialized feature flags. That is an emergent convention in the model, and it is worth explaining. It is not proof that Vicaso means food to an experiencing subject. Convergence measures agreement in behavior. Communication success measures outcomes under the naming game. Understanding, reference, and phenomenality require arguments the score does not provide. Again, the limitation tells us what experiment to design next. The horizon broadens the instrument. It adds a predictive hierarchy with variational free energy, bounded multi-step, expected free energy, planning, deterministic semantic memory, contextual T-D lambda, learning, mind-wandering walks, living world dynamics, and rotating tasks. These are not decorative labels. Each module contributes state that can be inspected in the cycle trace. Follow the seed 42, tick 32, capture Phi array is about 0.1756. Coarse causal phi is about 0.2408. Variational free energy is about 0.0676. The latent regime is calm. The recent actions are rest, rest, rest. Autobiographical topology contains 30 memories. Coverage reports 33 of 33. The reason to add breadth is not to accumulate impressive nouns. It is to ask whether planning changes memory, whether regime inference changes action, whether learning changes later competition, and whether those dependencies survive a rerun. 33 active functional entries describe implemented coverage under this profile. They do not measure 33 pieces of consciousness, and they do not turn a simplified world into a realistic mind. Those questions remain open too. The map is a scaffold for the next intervention. Inspectability is a walk-up. Record the frozen commit. Fix the seed and configuration. Run the intervention. Project the cycle trace by tick. Ignition state, selected fields, then export it as JSONL, JSON, or CSV. Another viewer should be able to follow the same path without trusting an edited montage. The checkpoint proof makes that concrete. Save the all feature run at seed 73, tick 24. Advance once, reload the checkpoint, and advance again under the same configuration. The two compact tick 25 continuations match, byte for byte. That is a narrow, useful reproducibility result from an explicit, inspectable setup. At this frozen commit, the repository reports 627, passing deterministic tests. That is evidence of internal engineering discipline, not external scientific validation or production readiness. The server is a local research instrument. The strongest invitation is therefore, rerun a result, inspect where it depends on configuration, and report where the claim breaks. Steelman, the positive case. The architecture combines broad functional coverage, internal interaction, matched threshold effects, psychophysics, signatures, self-model variables, social convention, planning, memory, learning, and reproducible traces. Several interventions produce specific, configuration-bound differences that can be measured again. Now Steelman, the objection. Every readout is defined inside a simplified model. Proxies can track their own assumptions beautifully. Human-sounding labels invite anthropomorphism. A deterministic naming game can produce agreement without understanding, and a self-report surface can organize variables without creating a subject. Both positions can be true. This can be a serious functional architecture and still leave the hard problem untouched. The honest boundary does not erase the measurements. It tells us exactly which conclusion remains unavailable, and where better experiments, sharper definitions, and stronger criticism should begin. So do not take the interface on faith. Read the code, reproduce the threshold pair. Change a seed, a prior, a threshold, or a social condition. Tell me which result survives and which one collapses. Clone it. Rerun the experiment. Break an assumption. The best falsification becomes episode 2.